Welcome to the Barefoot Bushcraft Radio Show. Today is Saturday, May 24th, 2014, and we are live worldwide. Also airing in syndication on iTunes and Freedomizer Radio. On today's episode, we discuss the health of Canadian children, examine some recent comments by Bear Grylls, and speak to Don and Shelley of 59nationalparks.com. Also featuring outdoor educator
Rhonda Earthflag, feeling pretty grateful for all the little creatures that came out today and showed themselves.
And now here's your host, the Wolfman.
Thanks for joining us, and let us not forget to say hello to our producer,
A.D. Venture. Hi, everyone. Great to be here today after a slight break from the radio show. Just a reminder to all our listeners, you can interact with us live during the show in the following ways. You can call us at 347-324-3704. You can tweet us at BF Bushcraft, or you can email me directly, adventure@producer.com. We'll try to respond to you as best we can. Now, take it away, Wolfman.
All right. Yes, today it looks like spring has finally sprung, and it's starting to get a little bit warm out. And, we have all kinds of great programs running this week. In fact, we had just before the show, we have some archery going on, and we had a bunch of people out doing that down in Niagara Falls. And tomorrow we've got a great thing going on up at the Humber College there that we're involved with the Wilderness Survival School. So it's going to be fantastic. Now, Rhonda, I know that you're running some programs as well with Nature's Backpack, and you've had a great week since the weather's warmed up. Why don't you tell us a little about that?
Sure. This morning I was out there today with our little young explorers, and it was the best day that I've had in the 4 years that I've been running my programs. Right from the start, I had the kids were coming to the program with all these nature mysteries that they found. One of them had a bird's nest that they had found, and it had like foam stuck in it and like grass and a whole bunch of different things. So we were trying to guess what that was. And another one had plants, flowers that they had found that we were trying to look through our field guides and find out what it was. But the best part of today was one of the little explorers had found eggs on a leaf, and we went over to explore it, and just a spontaneous exploration and curiosity just started happening, and then they just all started working together and going into the bush, and we did a huge wander. We left the parents behind on the path, and I realized that they weren't following us, so I turned around and went, we'll be right back, and then we just continued going, and we were in the bush for 30 minutes. We never did go back to the parents, and I guess they got fed up waiting for us to return, and so they came in and started looking for us, and it was just a fabulous day. A lot of creatures are out today showing themselves, and we were catching frogs, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful day.
That's pretty awesome. That's really, really great to hear because, the best thing in the world is to try to get people outdoors to enjoy your environment. In the United States, it is a long weekend, the Memorial Day weekend, which is, like a holiday over there where they celebrate some of the sacrifices people have made who served in the military. Very, very important, and not really a celebration per se, but a very important memorial, obviously, hence the name Memorial Day. So happy Memorial Day to the people of the United States who celebrate that. And it's fantastic that they had the opportunity, that the government observes that. So with that, I guess we will move on to our next segment, which is the news.
In the news.
All right, and in the news today, we are going to look at a story from the Gloucester Citizen, and we're going to tweet that story. So if you're not listening to this live, you can take a look at it on our Twitter feed. And it is actually a story about Bear Grylls. And it says, Bear Grylls says, let your children take risks. 50 things that they should try before the age of 11. Now, obviously, we're not going to go through all 50 things on the air, but I will go over some of the content of the news article. And it reads as follows. Parents are doing their children a disservice by not exposing them to risk, according to television adventurer Bear Grylls. Bear, who takes 13 men out to a desert island to fend for themselves in his new Channel 4 show, said that it was part of being a dad to teach his 3 sons how to make a catapult, how to tie a knot, and how to improvise a kite. His boys, he said, set up search and rescue scenarios at home. The Chief Scout is pushing for the school curriculum to be overhauled with survival skills such as lightning and fire and tying a knot as part of the core that children need to learn. They're added, if you should negate the risk for child's lives, you do them a disservice because you teach them not to be afraid of the streets. If you teach children to dodge risk, you are going to disempower them. If you empower children by teaching them how to do something dangerous, but teach them how to do it safely. Hundreds of children in Gloucestershire attended Scouts and Scouts where survival and outdoor skills are learned. Scouting numbers have increased in Gloucestershire with more girls than boys and adults seeking out everyday outdoor adventure. The number of young people in the adults has risen 1.4% last year, and membership figures have now reached approximately 6,612. Sue James from the Gloucestershire Scouts group said, it is true that you always know survivals. When we take them out to scout groups and take them out camping, they learn these skills such as putting up a shelter, making plate racks, starting fires. It's about learning and having fun at the same time. So the National Trust has come up with a list of about 50 things to do by the time you're 11 3/4 of the year old, and I'll just go through the first 10 on the list here. Climb a tree, roll down a really big hill, camp out in the wild, build a den, skim a stone, run through the rain, fly a kite, catch a fish with a net, eat an apple straight from the tree, and play conkers. So, again, we'll go through the whole list. You can go through that on your own. But, this really strikes a chord with me and outdoor educators like myself, A.D. Venture, and Rhonda, just because of the nature of what we do for a living. So, Rhonda, I would love to hear your take on the story.
I absolutely 110% agree that we need to allow our children and our youth to take more risks. I think a lot of parents are afraid of their child getting hurt, and along with AD and yourself, Wolf, I'm sure that we all run into parents who are hovering over top of their child in order to keep them safe. And a lot of times I actually tell my parents not to do that. It's one of the first talks that I do in my programs, where I coach and mentor the parents themselves, actually, on how to interact with their children in the outdoors, in that I encourage them not to hold hands and to allow their child to walk on the uneven ground. And I talk about that it increases their physical literacy in balancing and walking on uneven ground. And also just to allow them that freedom of running ahead of us. I always give them the rule that you always have to keep us in sight, and as long as you can keep us in sight, then you can run up ahead of us. And I'm working with 3 to 4-year-olds, and they learn that after the first few outings that we go on where their limitations are. And that's why it's so important to allow the children to take these risks, in that it gets them to test their boundaries on what they can do and to build their confidence and agility that they have in the outdoors and with them themselves. If you look at in the animal kingdom alone, you always see the young, they're always like play fighting, or they're like exploring and taking these little risks, and it's all about them learning about their environment and about their limitations, so that when they become an adult, they can assess and make their own judgments on what risks is acceptable accessible to them, and whether or not they want to take that risk or if they want to modify whatever their environment is to take a safer risk or not even take it at all. So it builds their confidence and allows them how to respond to these types of situations. Because to be honest, when a child grows up, there isn't the adults going to be there to protect them and to make those decisions for them. So I encourage everyone to allow their children to have these risks and for the child to learn their limitations so that when they become an adult, they are more confident and able to negotiate with themselves and emotionally react to different situations properly and have a more fulfilled life. So those are my thoughts about risk-taking. So I totally agree. What are your thoughts, Adie?
I do have to say that this topic I would love to discuss for a whole hour if we could, because it speaks on such a broader topic, specifically about society's view of risk as well as gain. Unfortunately, as Rhonda has mentioned, these days you do have a lot of these helicopter parents that do hover over their children, refusing even to let them get a scratch, wanting them to always be feeling good, like they're a winner, like they're special, and that has caused such a chasm between children and nature. And you can see this from this article that I posted on our Twitter feed, that it seems like they're trying to go to a total opposite of the pendulum. They say, oh, our kids haven't been exposed to nature or the outdoors or any risk. Let's just throw them right into the wilderness. For example, if you find a child that can't swim, you're not just going to throw them into an Olympic-sized swimming pool. You're going to let them splash in a puddle, let them get accustomed to water and understand that it's a friend, but that you also have to be wary for it. So I feel that even though it's a great step forward to have children exposed to more limited risk, where they can start to become more exposed to the outdoors, I think it actually speaks in a broader sense towards our disconnection with nature, our total lack of foresight as to what we're doing to the youth, as well as just a lack of understanding when it comes to risk management in general.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, AD, and that you don't just throw someone out into the wilderness and say, okay, take as many risks as you want. And that's where some organizations like Scouts and some boys clubs and things like that come into effect, where you have some mentors or even uncles. Like you don't even have to pay for it if you have someone in the family that's an outdoors person, but just to allow the freedom to explore, or for a child to climb a tree. I mean, it's all these risk-taking. I know when I was a child, I was always climbing a tree or building some type of fire in my fort that I built in the back forest and things like that. And I swear if the parents knew what I had done when I was a kid, they would be like shocked. But, it all comes down to having the parent there and building this container that is safe for these children to take these risks in a safe environment that is kind of controlled, but allowing the children also to have that freedom to take those risks. And while taking those risks, the kids are going to learn what their limitations are, and they're going to make mistakes. I know I made tons of mistakes, and I'm sure you two have as well. And so, but I just think that if there's people around them that allow these children and youth to take these types of risks, that they can develop their limitations so that it takes them off into adulthood. What about you, Wolf?
I couldn't agree more, and I think, the three of us sitting around talking about this is sort of preaching to the choir to a certain degree, that, I definitely think that children do need to have the opportunity to explore and self-develop and take the risks. And by risks, for our listening audience, right, I'm not saying, like, you should be going and using power saws without glasses of protection. I'm not saying you should be out there, trying to cross the street dressing in all black in the middle of the night. But safe risks, going for a hike, learning how to climb trees. Somebody that Rhonda and I are acquainted with found out the hard way that apparently in the city of Toronto it's a $20 fine if you climb a tree. I mean, who knew? And I think that goes, like AD was saying, where you have the pendulum swinging both ways. On the one end, you don't want people climbing up to the top of the trees and falling down and getting hit by cars and all this other nonsense. But at the same time, it's very, very important that people should be able to climb trees and not no climbing. And I think it all comes down to personal responsibility. And I think that it's almost gotten to the point, and as a professional in the field where I see this, where we have legislated personal responsibility out of existence. And by that, I mean that it's like I don't have to worry or care about anything or whatever because my instructor or whoever is going to take care of these risks. And that's simply not the case, and we hear this all the time, that the world that humans live in is fake. It's generated. Living in houses, driving cars, living in cities, that's not real. What really is real is being out in the wilderness. And as much as we get coddled and bubble wrapped and helicopter parents, the moment that you step out into the wilderness, all of that's gone. And you have your wits and your equipment and tools, and you've got nothing else. Nature doesn't forgive. Nature, one of the things that there was a very famous artist in Canada said is that nature loves you, but it will also try to kill you. And I think it's a very important point that as much as we love nature, nature has, doesn't have any emotion either way, whether we live or die. That's part of the cycle of life. Part of natural selection is to be the strongest and the fittest and make sure that you're going to be safe out there. So, I don't know. I'll pass it over and just sort of throw down the gauntlet with that one and see how either of you feel about that.
No, I agree with your Wolf that nature is unbiased, so they don't really care if you're going to take a risk or not. But it's all the survival, right? So you either eat or be eaten. So, but I mean that's true in the human society as well, and that stepping out of your comfort zone to take a risk, and it doesn't have to be like a dangerous risk either. It could be like a decision risk. And if you have that confidence that you can make that risk, take that risk, then that takes you further into life and just opens up more opportunities.
And again, Rhonda has some great points there, but unfortunately we're going to have to move to our next segment.
Roundtable Review.
Hey guys, there was the article about how in Canada that Canada had been failing in the fitness grade and that they were getting like a D-. And this I find that this takes kind of on the same level of taking risks in with our youth as well. In that we're finding that the kids are not as active as what they have been in the past, and that even in the underdeveloped countries like in Africa and stuff, that the kids there are more active. And there is an article, and I'll get them to post it on Facebook and on Twitter, that talks about the Canadian kids that are continuing getting a failing fitness grade in Canada. And I don't think it's just in Canada. I think it's in North America as well. And that I find that in the article it's talking about in comparing to other countries, we are, I think, 12th out of 15 countries of being active. And this comes down to a lot of kids not being allowed to just have free play, and that they have more scheduled activities like hockey or soccer and things like that. And this goes along with risk-taking and allowing that freedom for the children to just go out and play. So I'm going to pass it to you, Wolf, and find out what your thoughts are on this lack of being active in Canada.
Well, and I think it's very, very unfortunate that for us to not be active, and I think maybe that's the problem. It even goes down to the designs of our cities, where here in North America, most of our major metropolitan areas and cities, especially in Canada, are post-vehicle. And by that, I mean, automobiles, cars and trucks and Jeeps and all that stuff were pretty much on the road and invented in one form or another as our cities were growing. So it was very, very possible for us to drive from place to place, whereas in Europe, the old world, the car, they've had cities there for obviously tens of thousands of years before a car even existed. So you had to walk. Cities were built for walking. They were built and designed for you to go from place to place. Whereas where I live in southern Ontario, literally, if I didn't have a car, the nearest anything for me is about 10 kilometers away. So, while that's, I do enjoy that, it's basically just completely inappropriate for me to be able to walk anywhere. So it's kind of weird. So I think maybe it's partially the design of our cities that has put us in that position. I think perhaps it is part of our, just our psyche that it's just easier to drive. And I think just general mentality. Now, you see, I'm one of a firm believer that people always have that want and need for adventure, and modern-day computer games present that to us. Now, I'm not very, well up in computer games, but there's all kinds of really high-end computer games that people play, and you see them on TV. Two that come to mind are things like SOCOM and things like Medal of Honor and all sorts of other various games where you can get that adventure out in your mind. But where's your body? Your body's sitting on a chair. Whereas many, many years ago, computer games were really crappy, I have to admit. So where did you go for your entertainment? You had to go outside. And again, the mindset was you go outside and you have your adventures and you play and you get hurt and you climb trees and you fall and you break stuff sometimes. That's part of growing up. It's part of life. So I think we still have that mental need and want for this, but I think it has been replaced by the computer screen. Even if you look at what we do, before you used to go to parties to hear music. Now you do it on your computer sitting in a chair, right? Before you used to have to at least have to go to the library to look stuff up. Now you can do it sitting in a chair. There's just so much that is taking us away from being active in the way society is being put together and putting us in a position where it's much better to just sit around and look it up on a computer screen. And that breeds, because it stands to reason. If you're not active through all of those reasons, then you're just going to, your body is going to suffer for that. I don't know. What do you think, Rhonda?
Yeah, I find that also that a lot of the media has a role in this as well, in that, the media always reports on all the bad stuff that happens out in the world, and it escalates it to a point that there's a lot of fear out there for parents in keeping their kids indoors instead of just allowing them out and having that free play, which is really, really important, I think, in that just to let your kids just run out the front door and play. And it does come back down to the culture and the society, and that, everybody works. There's the mom and dad usually works. They don't come home until really, really late. And so sometimes they're like the key lock child, they have to come home. The child may be home by themselves until the parents get home, so they're not allowed to go out and play. So the society and our culture now has changed so much that it doesn't allow the opportunity for the children to be as active as when we were children, where there was a lot of times there was one parent that was at home. So I think a lot of it has to do with our society and our culture, and perhaps that needs to change, and I don't know how that can happen, but society, I would hope that it would slow down So what are your thoughts, AD?
Okay, everyone, we've reached that time of the show where we got to go for our commercial break. When we get back, we're going to speak to our special guest this week, Don and Shelley of 59 National Parks. This is AD Venture, the Wolfman, and Rhonda Herselak, and we'll see you on the other side.
All right, welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the Wolfman, and of course, I'm joined by my awesome co-hosts, AD Venture and Rhonda, and we have a special guest today, as we often do on the second half hour of the show. Why don't you take it away, AD?
This week, we welcome Don and Shelley of 59 National Parks. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Hi, AD. This is Don Hafner with 59 National Parks. It's great to be on your show this evening.
Thank you so much for joining us this week. We've been very much looking forward to speaking to you. We've had one of your friends on the show at the Barefoot Bushcraft Radio Show. So why don't I start off with the first question? Why don't you tell us a bit about who you are and a bit about your background?
Well, I'm originally from Kansas City, where we live now, and I've done a variety of things in life. I taught school in Texas for a period of time, and after that, I worked in the pharmaceutical business, and most recently was in financial services in the banking industry. My wife Shelley, she's been a registered nurse ever since I met her, and a very accomplished one. I won't tell you how many years she's been doing it, but I understand she was very good at her job. We have two grown sons, both married. One living in the United States, nearby where we live in Kansas City, and another lives in Africa. Don't see him quite as often.
That's incredible. So can you share with our audience what the two of you guys are up to at this current moment?
Well, right now we've been traveling basically the southern and eastern part of the United States since March 24th. And what we're doing is we're working our way through each of the 59 national parks in the United States, and our goal is to do that, to complete all 59 in 59 weeks. We go to park number 10 tomorrow, which is Cuyahoga Valley here in the Cleveland area, which is where we're at tonight. We've also visited some non-national park places, such as yesterday we went to Niagara Falls because it was on the way. And we've also visited a number of national monuments, Civil War battlefield sites, and other national park facilities over the last 9 weeks.
So, Don, when you took up this adventure to visit your 59 national parks in your 59 weeks, what inspired you to start you both on this adventure?
You know, Rhonda, that's a long story, and I'll do my best to condense it. Ultimately, our trip is about a couple of things. And first and foremost, it's about photography. And secondly, I think it's about inspiration. And I will elaborate on that a little bit. Shelley is probably for the past 7 years has had her eye on becoming a professional photographer. And I think I'm prejudiced, but I think she's very good at it. And we viewed this, we enjoy nature, wildlife, the outdoors, hiking, anything that we're capable of doing outdoors, we'd love to do it. And we viewed this as a vehicle for her to pursue her goal or her dream. But from the inspiration part, honestly, we don't, as a practical matter, we don't have any business doing this. Neither of us are retired. We still need incomes. But we decided that we were going to pursue our dream of, combining photography with the outdoors, and we love the national parks. So those elements kind of came together, and there were some other things that happened, but came together with our journey. And that's really where it all starts. That's the baseline, those two things.
So, Dawn, Can you please take us and the audience through the planning of this amazing voyage from its inception to the moment that you put your vehicle in drive and actually hit the road?
Sure. And I'm going to go back to about a year ago. There was, remember, this idea of photography was coming in the back of my mind. So we were watching television, and there was a commercial on, and there was a guy, and he had his son, he had his father, and he had an Airstream, and their goal was to visit the 59, or all the U.S. 59, all the national parks in the United States. And we looked at each other on the couch and said, wow, well, we'd like to do that. Well, at that moment, a year ago, I didn't know that there were 59 national parks. So I did some research and kind of looked at the map to see where they were at, and I learned that there were 59 of them, one of which we just included about a year ago, Pinnacles in California. And I knew that we'd have to do it quickly, that we would probably have to get back to our workaday life. So why don't we take a year off and do this? And we'll develop a website and get active on social media and, show people what can be done if they're interested in doing it. And she gave me this look like, yeah, right. Her buy-in wasn't immediate. And then last summer we went to South Dakota, which we hadn't been back in a long time. It's where Shelley is from, and it's where I went to college at. And we remembered how much we loved the outdoors out there in the Black Hills. And, from there it just started to gain momentum. We interviewed several website developers, selected one, began working on a website, opened a Twitter account last September. Instagram came a little bit after that. And from there, it really just started to steamroll from a fantasy to something that we were actually going to do. Then last December, we made some other significant investments. We bought a pickup. We bought a camper, neither of which we really have ever owned. We're not camper or RV types. At least we are now, but we were then. Learned as much as we could about that and began to develop a route and some ideas to draw interest to what we were doing, one of which we don't tell people where we're going next. Began to make a few reservations. I don't make them too far in advance, particularly in the RV world. March 1st, we put our house up for rent. We left on March 24th. Our home was still not rented. That was going to be a problem. But first part of April, it was rented. And we knew at that point we would be able to complete the trip. So, and there were, I got to tell you, and I tell students this when I talk to them. They ask me, did you ever have second thoughts about this when you were planning? The truth is we almost quit several times. But thankfully we did. So it was a long process. It really became my full-time job probably last December, just working on planning and getting everything in order.
That's amazing. So what kind of response did you get from your sons as well as like the rest of your family when you basically said, renting out the house, going out to see the world?
We get that question a lot. And honestly, we wanted people to tell us that we were crazy. Why are you leaving so much behind type thing? Because this journey was quite unlike us. It really was. It was a big risk for us, and it still remains a big risk. We wanted people to tell us we were crazy, and no one has. Everyone, the word I hear most often is cool. And that's such a cool thing that you guys are doing. And Shelley's family is especially supportive of it. My sons are enjoying and following. I would say that we had one family member who expressed doubts. And that was it. That was it. So we were encouraged rather than dissuaded from our friends and family from doing this.
So when you're going on these excursions, what kind of research do you do? Because, do you have excuse the pun, but do you have like a roadmap that you're following, or do you do it like as you go along?
You mean what we're going to do in each park?
Yeah, like when you're going to visit each park in the different state or the different national parks. Like, do you do a lot of research when you're going to each one, or beforehand, or do you do it as, okay, we went to this one, now we're going to the next one, and this is what we want to look at?
We've done quite a lot of research, absolutely, and we look for things. We try to cover as much about a park as we possibly can in the time that we have allotted, which isn't always that much. So, yeah, we have excursions set, things that we want to do before we arrive at a park. For example, at the Smokies, where I met Adam, who was a guest on your show previously, we knew that we were going to hike up to Abrams Falls. But we also leave room to be flexible. So, I think we're using a combination of two. We don't have a set, rigid schedule when we arrive at any park, but we always know that there are certain things that we want to do when we arrive there. So, yeah, it's a lot of research. So, for example, tonight we're going to Cuyahoga tomorrow, and I've read about it quite a bit, and I've got the National Geographic guide right here beside my bed, and I'm going to read that chapter again before the night is over.
If you're just joining us here on the Barefoot Bushcraft Radio Show, we are honored to have Don Hafner of 59nationalparks.com. So, Don, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I was hoping you could go a little more into detail about this. But 59 National Parks also sells professionally shot photographs of the national parks. Can you tell us more?
Can you be a little more specific with your question, please?
Well, on your website, you have a listing there that you are selling photographs of the national parks, and those must be some amazing photos. So I was hoping you could tell us a little more. It even says that they're framed and matted, which sounds quite nice.
Oh, I got you. Well, what we're doing on our website, and this has taken a little bit longer than we anticipated, completed 9 parks as well as some of the national monuments and other sites. And what we're doing is we're building a page for albums. So, for example, there's an album which should be up and running. There should be 3 albums up and running here next week. One for Hot Springs, one for the Everglades, and one for Dry Tortugas in Florida. And what we're doing there is we're picking out what we regard as the very finest, maybe 6 to 10 photographs from each place. We're taking upwards of 500 of each park that we go to. And so we're screening those very carefully, and we do limited processing on our photos. And once the albums are up, it'll be linked to a site where whoever is interested, for example, I really like this alligator photo, they can link to it. And should they want to buy a framed and matted 8x10 or whatever size really they want, we can accommodate them on that. Also, eventually we're going to have an inventory, probably visit some art shows along the way, but that's taken much longer than I anticipated, so it's not quite ready yet, but it's very close. We kind of lit a fire under our web developer this week, so he's been working really hard on it. He's doing a great job. So that's where those will be when they're up. It does have a tab. It just says under construction.
That's really fascinating. Now, I've heard that you guys have partnered with someone called Flow 397. It's your official gear supplier. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you guys partnered up and sort of the products that they end up offering to the public as a result?
Flow 97 is it's a relatively young company. I would describe it as a startup, and we met them just online and started on the direct messages, started talking to one another, which led to a phone call. And what Flow 397 does is they sell casual wear that's themed to the national parks. And so, for example, I have a shirt that they sent to me that has a moose on it, and the face of the moose lists in sentences, in phrases, is ultimately lists every national park. And every time I wear that shirt, people ask me, where do I get those at? It's pretty funny. But what Flow does, and the reason that we were attracted to them, is for every item they sell, regardless of the price, they contribute $3.97 charitable causes in support of the national parks. And so these guys, Ben and Dave, they live and die for the national parks, and they enjoy them at least as much, if not more, than we do. So what we do is we do a little bit of promotion for them via Twitter and via Instagram and on our website, and then by wearing the gear when we're out and about, it draws some interest. And we also on Twitter, Ben and I, one of the founders of Flow 397, we moderate a chat Wednesday night at 9 Eastern on Twitter called Park Chats. And we talk about issues related to parks, not just the national parks, but states and even local. For example, last week we did park wildlife. And we have quite a few people who come in and join us, and it's always a lot of fun. It's always very interesting to do that particular chat. So that's how we work together with them.
That's a great cause for Floor 397 to give back to the national parks, because I know that they, I don't know about down there, but up here sometimes our parks suffer that they don't get enough funding. So I can see that getting that type of influx of income from charities works really good.
Well, Ben and I are all about keeping the parks funded, and we didn't start because of it, and Flow 397 didn't start because of it. And I don't want to get too political, but everybody saw what a disaster it was when the parks closed down for a few weeks last October.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't want that to happen again.
No, absolutely not. So just staying on the topic of gear, because you're going on all these excursions, what type of gear and equipment are you using for say, your excursion here in Cleveland, where you're at right now?
Shelley and I are really pretty new to the whole gear business. We really are. I would describe the way that we're living now, because we live in such a small area, we've become minimalists in a way. So we have what we need. We have backpacks, and we have hiking shoes and hiking socks, raincoats, rain gear, and then, of course, the gear that we get from Flow 397. But we use very basic gear, and we tend to go inexpensive on it. We don't have any other gear companies sponsoring us, and nor are we really seeking to. So we take care of that stuff ourselves, and we go pretty minimal. We have what we need, but we don't have too much.
So, Don, we're really interested here on the Barefoot Bushcraft Radio Show if you have any interesting stories from your voyage so far.
I have a lot of interesting stories, I think, and most of them relate to meeting people along the way. And this was not part of our plan. We've met a number of people via friends or people that we knew or via social media while out on the road. And they've all been outdoor enthusiasts, national park enthusiasts. And let me give you a crazy example the way it worked out. There's a gentleman out of California, and his name is Richard Harrison, and he's a real cool kind of California guy. He really is. Real laid-back guy, real smart guy. And I think he's someone who is very successful in business, had a great family. And we just started tweeting back and forth, really, and I learned that he, too, was on a quest to see all the national parks. And I think he's at 49 or maybe 50 right now. And he's done it over a 4-year period, and he hopes to finish this year. But I asked him, I said, well, why don't we meet up somewhere along the way? We can talk a little bit, maybe sit around the campfire, something like that. And so we just quizzed one another about where we were going to be, and this was such a coincidence. He was going to Dry Tortugas in Florida, which is rather hard to get to, on the same day that we were. So we rode out on the boat together to Dry Tortugas and really have become fast friends as a result. And that's really one of the things we're most grateful for, because we've met about 15 folks that way so far, and there's actually someone coming over to our campsite tonight that we met on Twitter. It's really been such a blessing of the trip for that to happen, and it has really helped us to stay as engaged as we need to stay in order to do this. Because I got to tell you guys, this is not easy to do, what we're doing. It's really not. So to me, that's the best feel-good story of the trip so far. We've had some foibles too. We were on most of them relate to GPS. We've been to some very interesting places because of GPS. One was a one-lane dirt road with a 5,000-pound camper that was about 300 feet above a river with no room for any of the cars to go by. And the road was so bad, it did several $100s worth of damage to our camper. And we were scared to death. It's one of the things we were talking about. It. What are you going to remember most about this trip so far? Well, that was one of the three things that came up, was being on that road. So there have been some things like that, but 98% of it has been great.
Well, sometimes you will often find that you remember the harrowing adventures like that, as much as some of the very positive things that happened. I have a few minutes left in our show. We got about. Okay. I'm sorry.
All right.
We got about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, I can imagine. So can you tell us what your feedback from the public has been like? I mean, you have a website, you have a blog. Obviously, I'm sure we're not the only radio station that has had you on the show. So what is the public feedback being about this great project that you have?
The public feedback has been incredible and far more than we ever expected. And we've gotten a fair amount of mention. We have been on a couple of radio shows, and we've been in some newspapers, and we've been on our story has been written about or posted on over 400 websites. And the public feedback has been incredible. We get lots of emails that don't come through our website as comments. We get far more of those than we do comments to post. And all but two of them, not counting the spam that we get, but all but two of them have been overwhelmingly positive. People say, well, we're living vicariously through you, and we're so inspired by what you do. And the thing that has meant the most to us really has been the following that we've been able to develop among school children. And the kids are so neat and ask such great questions about what we're doing. So it's well exceeded my expectations, the public reaction and the public feedback that we get. It's been fantastic.
And with that public feedback, it's nice to, when you tell your stories and about your adventures, that you would inspire someone to maybe go out and explore some of the national parks too. So one of the questions, we have a couple of minutes left, and I just wanted to ask you, because we always ask our guests this question, and some people call themselves adventurers and some call them explorers, and we're curious to know, what would you call yourself and Shelley? Would you be more of an adventurer or an explorer?
I think I remember the question, and I put a lot of thought into it. I don't know if I came up with a good answer. I would say that we would describe ourselves as adventurers, because when we wake up, we're thinking about today's adventure, not about what we're going to explore today. So, explorers kind of implies that you don't really know what's going to happen next. Well, on a day-to-day basis, we have a very good idea of what's going to happen that day and what adventure we're going to take. And that's good. And as I said previously, we're flexible. I mean, if we see something, we'll make a diversion. But, yeah, we're adventurers, absolutely.
That's awesome. That's incredible. Well, it's about that time again where we are going to wrap up our show. And I would like to thank you so much for being on the Barefoot Bushcraft Radio Show. Again, it will end up on iTunes, and we will send you a link to that. So I'm the Wolfman, and I am joined by my co-hosts, A.D. Venture and Rhonda. And we will see you next week at the same time, at the same place. Thank you for tuning in.